present to you today, along with my amazing colleague, Helitz Villegas. We will be speaking to you today about survivor-centered services in complex cases. What does that mean? We're talking about cases that involve sexual assault, forced marriage, and immigration. Now, next slide, Helitz. So before we get started, I do want to go over our agenda and like the map of what we will be talking with you today. I will walk us through an introduction of the Tahirih Justice Center, what we do, how we do it, the services that we offer, the people that we serve. And then Helitz will walk us through an explanation of forced marriage and the work that she does for the Forced Marriage Initiative. We'll have a case scenario that we will discuss. I will then walk us through abuse and the migration process and why those cause such vulnerabilities for our clients and the folks that we serve. Then we'll complete our conversation with a more deeper discussion about what child marriage is, and finalize with what our role is. What our role is as advocates in this movement when we're working with cases like this. So it's a really packed hour, and we're really excited to be here with you. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to do question and answers and chats, and we will answer as we are able to. And if we can, we'll also leave some time at the end to have a deeper conversation. So I'm going to start with Tahirih. Who are we? What do we do? So the Tahirih Justice Center, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with us, is a national nonprofit legal services organization that provides immigration legal services to immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. Now, we say immigration legal services because that is our bread and butter, but we do so much more. And I'll talk about some of the things that we do. First and foremost, like I said, our bread and butter is immigration legal services. And we do humanitarian relief for those who identify or who are being subjected to harm, abuse, and violence on account of their gender. We make sure that they have causes that we are able to obtain relief for under the laws of the United States. And those are the cases that we focus on. Now, as we know, many of our clients don't only have an immigration case. And I know if you're in this work, you know that it's very intersectional, and sometimes there's other issues that need to be addressed. And we have found that family law is one of those issues. Often, especially when there is gender-based violence, there is some sort of accompanying family law case. And this is also true for forced marriage, right? When we're talking about those who are being forced into marriage. And so family law is something that many of our attorneys or some of our attorneys are also practiced in. But when we don't have the in-house ability to do that, we have many partners throughout our multiple service locations through MOUs or LAV grants with legal services organizations where we do the complementary work that needs it so that our clients receive holistic legal services. We do have a really robust civil law team where we engage in appellate advocacy. We do impact litigation to support our clients. And we also do work to support, thank you, I'm gonna slow down a little bit, thank you, Gabriela. We also do the work that we need to when we are trying to recover damages for those clients that are impacted due to the violence. Helitz will be talking about the work that we do under Forced Marriage Initiative, and we definitely, all of the services that we do have access and benefit to social services case management. And that means that our clients are often navigating many different complex issues. And in order to be supported and made feel whole, sometimes we need to connect them to those partners in the community and case manage with them Also, medical services are incredibly important because often our clients are facing some medical situations, and it's a vital step, whether it's physical or emotional, that they get those services in order to fully recover from the trauma that they've been impacted by. Next slide, please. So I didn't say this already, but I want to say a little bit more about Tahirih. One of the things is that I said we're national, and we do our work from 5 different locations nationwide. I am in our Houston, Texas office, which is our Texas location. Halitz is out of our Falls Church, Virginia, which is our Greater DC office. We also have an office in our San Francisco Bay Area, Atlanta, Georgia, and Baltimore, Maryland. And at each of these offices, we offer all of the services that we just spoke about. So how do we do this and who do we serve? So I'll start with the how. I talked about our direct services, and that is a key component of the work that we do, but that's not all that we do. I feel very lucky that we work with an organization that also very heavily does training, education, and policy advocacy. We learn of the work through our clients and our direct services, but then we elevate those issues that we see on our day-to-day cases, what's happening, what impacts our community is facing, and then we elevate those to our policy team to hopefully make changes in the law, both at the state, local, and at the federal level to change the outcomes for many survivors, some that will never ever talk to Tahirih or any other organization like ours. But then not only do we do that, we also bring our learnings to do training and education in sessions like this, right? For other service providers, for attorneys, and also for the community at large that really desperately needs to have this information as well. Now, one of the things that may be really surprising, because I know we talk a lot about immigrants and the folks that we serve, but I wanted to share who we actually serve. And one statistic that sometimes may alarm individuals is that 70% of those of the clients that we serve experience the violence here in the United States. The type of crimes or the types of violence that we speak of when we're talking about survivors of gender-based violence that we serve here at Tahirih have been impacted by sexual assault, by rape, honor crimes, domestic violence, female genital mutilation or cutting, also trafficking, torture, and forced marriage. So with that, it's a little bit more understanding of the work that we do. And I'm gonna pass this over to Halitz.
Thank you so much, Mari Carmen. That's really helpful in grounding all of us in the work that Tahirih does. And hopefully I'll do as good of a job in grounding us in better understanding the Forced Marriage Initiative, which is the program that I manage. I'm Halitz Villegas. I manage the Forced Marriage Initiative, which is a unique program of the Tahirih Justice Center that was created in 2011 to galvanize a response to the issue of forced marriage here in the United States. Given everything Mari Carmen shared and those we serve, back then we began getting calls from service providers, from service seekers, from survivors who needed support because of the issue of forced marriage. But many of them were needing support and not immigration legal services. They were not needing that type of support from Tahirih. And so that is how our program came to be. We began, fielding those calls, and, sending folks back out to the service providers we thought would be able to help. And those service seekers were coming right back to us needing extra support. And so our program dives deeply into legal and policy and field-based research, education and training, like what we're doing today. We are often creating tools for service providers. And so if you're someone who may use a tool on this issue, feel free to contact us. But I think most importantly, we work in, coalition, we work in collaboration with other folks aware of this issue. We chair the Forced Marriage Working Group, and together we draft recommendations for legal and policy change. And most importantly is the fact that we do serve individuals directly. And so if you are working with someone who is facing this type of harm, you're more than welcome to refer to us. If you yourself would like some technical assistance, some additional support in working with someone who is facing this type of harm, we are happy to be of support to you. Okay. And so what is, forced marriage? This slide here gives us a definition that grounds us in the work that we do at Tahirih. This is a widely used definition. And so for all of us to be on one page, a forced marriage is a marriage where one or both people do not or cannot consent to the marriage, and typically involves elements of force, of fraud, or coercion. At the Tahirih Justice Center, we do not equate forced marriage with an arranged marriage. An arranged marriage is a process in which families may take the lead, but the ultimate choice to marry remains with the individual. And like many definitions and terms in the movement to end gender-based violence, forced marriage is, more or less an advocate term, a lawmaker term, an academic term. And it's important that we remember always that survivors or individuals at risk may name their situation differently. But it's truly important for us to listen and especially for that piece regarding consent. Is the process that is being described to us, including free consent? And so when we're talking about choice, when we're talking about consent, it is not just about the partner that is being presented to the individual, but it is really choice across the board in the entire marriage process altogether. And so the person should be able to express their wishes freely without any negative consequence or fear. They want to get married, right? They want to get married to the person who they're being introduced to, but even the timeline and the idea of marriage altogether, again, all of those pieces should be a yes. If it isn't, or there is some sort of hesitancy, fear, belief that in sharing what they are thinking or their opinions, there could be a negative consequence, then we know that there is a piece here regarding consent that likely is not being fully met. And so this next graphic, which was provided to us by Vidya Sri, a survivor who was at Harvard at the time that she created this continuum, and working with Darakshan Raja, who was at the Urban Institute at the time, helps us to, I think, better understand the differences or how an arranged marriage process may become a forced marriage process. But note that these processes do not always occur in this linear way, right? And families and those who perpetrate abuse may ebb and flow, in the process. But hopefully it gives us a better idea of how someone may begin in a process where, family suggested the marriage and they felt they had some control, and then find themselves over time that they're unable to truly express their wishes. And if they do express them, the family dismisses those wishes. The family uses coercive tactics, emotional, mental, abusive tactics to shame them, to reinforce what the family wants for them. And ultimately, the individual may find themselves in that non-consensual marriage, which is really daunting if you think about maybe feeling like you had some sort of control. In the beginning, perhaps you even said that it was okay for your family to be involved in the process, but they promised you that you could wait, or they promised that your wishes would be met. And now you're finding yourself in a situation where things are moving forward without your control, and you are truly, feeling stuck. And so a little bit more that hopefully challenges the way that we think who a person at risk or who a survivor of this type of harm is. Back in 2011, we knew that we would need research to be able to share with folks that this harm does occur in the United States. The US is part of the globe, and this is a global problem. And so we do have to address this issue here at home. And so in 2011, we conducted a national survey specifically focused on immigrant families and those service providers. And that survey listed at least 56 countries the families came from. We saw diversity across the religious backgrounds of those families, including families with no religious affiliation whatsoever. The majority of those victims listed were female, and that continues to be the trend that we see in those who we serve. And the victims included folks who were US citizens or folks with different status, or including other stable status. Weddings were occurring both in the US or abroad, and those with threatened travel abroad had increased, safety needs, as well as noticing that many of the victims were under the age of 18, which led to our work in the child marriage space, which we'll talk about as we move ahead. And so I mentioned that the majority of the victims that the survey listed were female, and we continue to see that forced marriage is a type of harm that does impact individuals of all backgrounds, all ethnicities, ages, gender, socioeconomic status as well. But we also see that those who are women and girls, or who are perceived to be women and girls, do experience unique barriers, particularly due to the root causes that keep forced marriage as a tool of power, of control, of coercion. And so what we have tried to do with this graphic is help us to look at those root causes that exist across communities, across societies, root causes that uphold forced marriage as a tool of power and control. And then we relate those to that magnifying glass, which are the individual, the family level triggers that together can be that case specific motivation for why a forced marriage is seen as a solution, right? And so you may come from, a community with very strong, patriarchal values, very strong control over female sexuality. And your particular family may be opposing of you having contact with what they deem be the opposite sex, right? And perhaps to shield you from getting a bad reputation, moving forward with a marriage sooner rather than later may be what in your particular family is seen as appropriate, right? And so again, the root causes are present across communities, and every case is so unique because all families are unique. Even if we are of same or similar background, what is okay in your household is not okay in mine. We may not have, fully shared values and beliefs. And so these cases truly are complex, and it's very important to understand as much as we can these societal dynamics at play. Okay. Now, you may be wondering, why are we so focused on this issue, particularly at this conference? And so I'll just name that forced marriage is a form of violence on its own. There is no need for another type of harm to occur. The marriage itself is an act of violence, and that is something that is often not as common for us in this work to understand. When a woman or girl feels they have no real choice in deciding who they marry, they lose a great deal of power and control over their body, over their health, over their life altogether. And though we know that this type of harm does exist by itself, more often than not, it is just one part of a spectrum of other harms that someone who is being pressured to marry or who refuses to marry faces in their lifetime. And so this type of abuse does intersect with other types of harm that are maybe more commonly recognized. And if we are not asking the right questions, if we may be honestly missing a great piece of the puzzle in providing holistic services. We may be missing a key piece when it comes to truly providing safety and healing spaces for those who we are working with. I know that was true of me as someone who worked as a domestic violence sexual assault advocate in the past. I never dug deeper as to the onset of someone's marriage or relationship. And so this quote,
Lillian. Okay.
And so this quote on the left, I like to read because it does speak to at least my experience. And so it says that advocates speak to many women who are facing domestic violence, abuse, and or sexual assault in their marriage, but only later, if ever, honestly, in these conversations, does it emerge that the conditions upon which they were married may have been under duress, pressure, and ultimately against their will. And so we see this issue connecting with those types of harms that you see, on the screen, and that's a whole presentation in itself. And I'm happy to dive deeper into all of those. But for the purposes of this conference, we'll just do a special focus on how forced marriage intersects with rape and sexual assault. I think it's no surprise if someone is entering a marriage that is non-consensual, the sexual acts that occur within that marriage are also non-consensual. And so we see rape and sexual assault as a consequence of forced marriage. So important to keep in mind when you think about how unique avenues for prevention with this type of abuse. But we also see rape and sexual assault be a consequence for forced marriage. And so if we think back on that slide that I shared earlier, that graphic regarding the community and societal level factors and those specific family level triggers, we know from our work with survivors directly that for some families, when someone is a victim of rape or sexual assault, some families may want to, quote unquote, fix the situation. And the way that they find to, again, fix the situation is by marrying that person that's who was assaulted and marrying them off to, at times, even the perpetrator to, again, keep things under wrap, keep things, hush hush quietly, and that is something that we've heard from survivors. And so I'd like to walk us through what a typical case can look like, if that's okay. We may go into the case discussion a little bit shorter than previously expected, but I do think it's important to think about how a case can present, and then think about, are we asking the right questions when we're working with survivors to hopefully dig deeper into why they are connecting with us. Okay. And so here are some questions that I hope you can think about before we get into the case scenario. If Carla, the survivor, reaches out to your agency, in what ways could her case challenge your current intake or your current, initial contact protocols? Think about, some of the strengths and assets that Carla has, and let's think about some ways that, in the meantime, Carla can protect herself with. Okay, and so Carla in this scenario is 18 years old and is a US citizen. Her parents exercise a great deal of control over her and her siblings' lives, forbidding dating and requiring she come straight home when school lets out. Carla has a part-time job at a local store, but she must give her parents her work schedule every week and make sure that she is home within a half hour of her shift ending. Carla's parents have always told her that they would arrange her marriage, and recently they informed her that they found a good match and want to travel to their home country over summer break for the wedding. Carla has told her parents she is not ready to get married, but her family insists that the marriage must go forward now. Her parents have told her that if she does not marry the man of their choosing, she will bring shame to the family, and that her refusal to get married is killing them and it's ruining her younger sister's marriage prospects. Carla's parents rarely use physical violence against her, but her father did hit her during their most recent argument about the marriage. In the past, Carla has also witnessed an older sister being beaten by their parents after she fled from her abusive husband and tried to return to the family home. Her sister was also resistant to the marriage their parents had arranged, but ended up giving in to family pressure. Carla does not want to end up in the same situation, but she just does not know how to safely resist the pressure to get married. And so if we could use the chat feature, I love for us to discuss a bit about, or for me to learn, a bit about how this type of scenario, if Carla were to approach your organization, in what ways would this case challenge your intake process? Would you be able to provide Carla with services? And if so, what would that look like?
I'm just gonna start the conversation, Halitz, because I know before I had joined the Tahirih Justice Center, I worked for Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid for many years, and hi to many of my former colleagues that are joining and folks that I work with. And I recall similar cases where it was just really difficult. I was a family law practitioner, and I would see cases that you would present, and I was sometimes baffled about what the next steps would be. And there's a question. Can you remind me if Carla is a minor in this case?
Thank you. In this scenario, Carla is 18. And I appreciate the question because it also helps us to think about additional complexities if Carla were to be under the age of 18. And when we move ahead to discuss the child marriage piece, we actually will talk a bit about some unique protections that Texas has for individuals in this situation who are under the age of 18. So I'll just share, feel free to chime in the chat, and Mari Carmen, if you see anything, feel free to chime in, as it's difficult for me to see the chat of my other screen. But I'll just say that often we hear from folks the issue being, if they are working for an organization that provides services to those who experience intimate partner violence, they feel a bit stuck because the violence that Carla is facing is from her father in the one incident that we shared of recently being hit by the father. And so that is something that comes up a lot in our work. Typically to that, I'm advocating for Carla, I like to remind folks of the abuse that Carla is attempting to avoid. And so in thinking about that future violence of a marriage she does not want, the acts within a marriage that would occur that is non-consensual. And that is a way to uplift a very uncommon prevention moment for us as advocates. Often we are not working with folks who know, hey, this is going to happen to me if this occurs. And this is a very unique way for us to serve survivors, to know that, she knows what happened to her sister. She knows what will happen if she refuses to marry, but also if she goes through with the marriage. We know there is as much as she may want to avoid certain acts within the marriage, it'll almost be impossible, if not impossible, for her to be able to avoid the sexual contact and potentially domestic violence and all of that may carry on to, children that Carla may have as well. And so this is a very unique prevention moment. And at least that is the hope that in us sharing this presentation, that you all take with you as well, to be able to see Carla as within scope of services. And so
Khalid, there's a couple of questions that I want to interrupt.
Wonderful.
But I think there's some important points that are being made that I wanted to highlight. One of it comes that the individuals may have been controlled in a way that they may not be able to answer questions for an intake. They might be controlled to the point that they don't know the information that we may be asking for. Also, her age is an issue, and it's also probably one of the strengths. She's got choice, she's working, she's a citizen. So there's a couple of things that have been highlighting, but because I think this is where we can wrap it back in, but how can we make our intake system more accessible so that these types of questions are answered in a way that, somebody who's experiencing this type of harm would be captured in our more traditional intakes that we do?
No, I think that is a great question, and certainly I think a training in itself to discuss, the screening and responding pieces. But at its I think most basic nature is really asking about how relationships, came to be, in the onset, right? Often during intake protocols, we are asking about, dates, of marriage and location, but we need to take a bit of a step back and asking more about just how that relationship came to be, altogether. And so I think that's a great way for us to think about what is it that we're asking and what are we not? And it is no surprise to us that the more we see folks changing, that process and asking about the onset, we are seeing more and more cases, right? Where, again, this issue does not exist by itself, and it is often, compounded with other forms of harm. And so I hope that we can ask a bit more. But I also understand the point regarding her being 18 and not sure about, how to answer questions. And so how do we, work with or speak with Carla in a way that is survivor-centered, that is non-judgmental, that is just, asking her to what help is she looking for, right? And before we dive into, nuanced questions.
One area that I know I would see often doing divorces, I would get intakes that come in through either the hotline or referral through a partner organization, and they were either trying to get divorced or there was a custody suit. And I would notice the difference in the ages between the parties. And often we were already like many years into the marriage. Sometimes the children were grown. But then when I did the math, I realized like, oh my gosh, you were married like to a really older individual and you were only like a teen. And then the answers start coming in and the rest of the marriage happens. But I think that we sometimes fail to ask those questions because they've been in a marriage for a long time, or there might be other situations that come in. And we don't ask that next question. So.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot. I see lots of things coming up in the chats, and one piece that I'll uplift. Someone asked, what culture is Carla from? I think that is a really great question. That depending on how the answer, how it's answered and what we're looking for can certainly be an asset or potentially harmful if we are, again, non-judgmental, right? And so I think remaining, again, non-judgmental point of view, regardless of the background that, the service seeker is from, asking those questions regarding what is supportive to them, right? What or who are individuals in their life that, that they trust, that are under corner, what has helped them in the past, can give us a better idea if they do have community members or other folks in their life that could be helpful to them. And also bringing that up because sometimes we are working with individuals who are not wanting support from community. They are very scared in getting services, or have been told, this is family business, right? They are worried about shaming their family. And often, we do need to ask if working with an organization or with an advocate of similar background is something that they want. And you may be surprised about that answer. But I do love that question because, sometimes we have to, we do have to dig deeper and to think about, how do we serve the whole person, and not be surprised if they actually are not wanting to engage with community. Yeah.
So, Halitz, there's a question, and I know that we're going to share this at the end, but how do individuals get referred to the Forced Marriage Initiative or to have these types of discussion? Do we just go through the website?
Definitely. Thank you for asking. And so we have our own email. It's FMI, so F as in force, M as in marriage, I as in initiative @Tahereh. I'll drop it in the chat. We'll also have our direct line, and we have our own website as well, preventforcedmarriage.org. And you can either refer a service seeker directly, or you can make contact. You'll likely speak with me or my colleague, Brianna, who is our program associate working directly with the survivors we serve. And really, it's depending on what you're looking for or what the survivor is needing. If working together in a partnership and us be a thought partner to you is helpful, we'll do that. If referring the case fully over is what's most appropriate, we can do that. If just working with you directly and just getting technical assistance, or you're like, I get it, there's something going on here, I need help, we are more than happy to be your thought partner and work together and share our resources, intake protocols, tools, you name it. Happy to be of that support. And so I'm looking at time. We have lots to cover, but I'll want us to move ahead if that's okay. Thank you for the discussion. Let's move ahead. I'll pass it to you, Mari Carmen.
Sounds good. So Halitza's talked about something really important, right? This forced marriage, this additional type of vulnerability that, it's really important and creates a complexity, as you can tell from the discussion that we had. So I'm going to now turn to talk about what happens when there's abuse, trauma and also the migration that we talk about. So if you can advance us to the next slide. Working with those who are survivors, we already know that there's vulnerabilities there. Some of them we've been talking about, in this conference, in many of our trainings. And what I want to talk about really is like, what are some contributing vulnerability factors for those who are immigrants in our country? It is not that they're a different culture. It is not that, any of these othering things that sometimes we hear, but the increase in vulnerability comes from many different directions. First and foremost, from all the individuals that I've talked to, and that we work with, there is usually a catalyst, something that creates the need to leave their beloved country. It might be a war, it may be, tremendous poverty, it may be gang violence, it may be violence in their own homes, but something typically causes the need to leave immediately from everything that you know and the people that you love and the things that you've grown up with. So usually there's that pre-migration trauma, and we know what trauma does to an individual. So everybody that is here as an immigrant, there's typically something that has triggered that. And if it's not, maybe there might be children, but there's generational trauma based on that also issue that prompted the individuals to leave and depart their countries. Then there's this additional stress that's associated with the migrating journey itself. I know I recently did a trip down to the Rio Grande Valley, went into the border and actually connected with, met, and talked to many organizations that are providing services to those who are journeying to enter our country for safety. And even some of the studies that we've done together with Oxfam and Deterrence, the journey itself creates so much stress. We've seen the stories in the news of folks that walk for many miles through various countries in very arduous situations. And also in that journey, there's increased vulnerability to sexual assault. So by the time that maybe they come to our country, they're also already suffering with additional trauma than the trauma that they had left with. There is that post-migration strain and stigma. Once they enter the country, it's not like, okay, everything magically will be disappearing, you're in safety. Unfortunately, that is not the case. We have many services and we do offer much relief because of the laws that we have. That said, that is not easy. Like entering the country, the immigration process, integrating to a new community, and then also the stigma that our society puts on those who may be undocumented or recent immigrants could increase vulnerability. There's loss of socioeconomic status. There are some individuals that travel great distances to come to our country and might be lawyers or might be doctors in other countries, or were able to maintain some kind of, profession. But as they enter our country, they're no longer able to exercise, or they might have come, with very little and not the ability to work. There's also that loss of family members, structures, community. Halit's talked a little bit about cultural norms and expectations. Sometimes they may come into a country area of the country where they're very geographically isolated. Maybe they are, far away in a ranch in the Panhandle, or maybe they were bused into another community far away from anybody that they know. So that can create additional vulnerability. And if they just arrive into the country and may be less aware of how to move around and how to do things, that also increases vulnerability to many types of exploitation and additional violence. Next slide, please. There's also, of course, other things that contribute, like power imbalance between parents or partners. traditional patriarchal beliefs, rigid gender roles that they may be coming with, lack of information, failure to follow immigration documents as a tool of control. I know that many of us have experienced and worked with those where that is occurring. So some of the humanitarian relief that immigrants might be eligible for, and these are the areas where Tahirih specializes, both as an affirmative relief or as a defensive when they're in process of deportation. And these are for those individuals who are fleeing or are victims of some type of gender-based violence. Asylum can be applied both affirmatively when somebody arrives or at the expiration of some sort of visa when they first arrive, or it's a relief that could be asked for in a proceeding, but it's very timely when you can apply for it. And that is only for those individuals who are fleeing their country on account of a well-founded fear of being persecuted on account of their race, their religion, their nationality, membership in a particular social group. I think we lost our screen there. There we go. Or political opinion. These are very complicated, complex cases. And now, if you heard, I didn't say anything about fleeing because of gender-based violence, which is not in itself yet a way or something that somebody can claim, but we can craft very unique arguments that being a survivor of gender-based violence fits into one of the categories. So really important to know that. There's U visas for those individuals that have been subjected to certain types of crime in the United States and who are cooperating with the authorities to bring that crime to justice. The same thing for a T visa, which is that for survivors of human trafficking or labor trafficking, special immigrant juvenile visas for children who have been abused, neglected in our country. And obviously the Violence Against Women Act self-petitions, which is available to those individuals who are married to a US citizen or legal permanent resident, or who are the children or parents of as an individual who's a US citizen or legal permanent resident who is being abusive. And the abuse could be not just physical, but includes emotional, financial abuse, and many other kinds of harm that happens. So these are typical types of relief that are available for those who have been survivors. And it just depends on what area. And I do recommend expertise and communication so that the correct relief is something that is applied for. But I think one of the most important things is for individuals to know that there are certain remedies and relief so that they can make choices and decisions about how they want to proceed and what choices they can make to move forward and remain in our country in a safer situation.
I'm going to wait a minute to allow for interpretation to catch up a bit.
Okay. So I also wanted to do a really quick plug. This is no longer very recent arrivals. When Afghanistan fell, we did have an influx of individuals who came to our country fleeing Afghanistan because of the impact that would happen to them, their families, and others as the new regime took over. Many of these individuals were women. Women were very much specifically impacted by this change in regime. And so we opened an Afghan asylum line, which remains open. I just wanted to share that here because I know that our Afghan sisters and brothers have been all over the state. And if they do need assistance still I want you to know that there is some availability to still provide referrals and or acceptance for asylum work. And I also want to plug the fact that we are currently, the Afghan Adjustment Act has recently been reintroduced. So this is really important that is happening, and it could create relief for so many individuals. So if you need more information about that, please check out our website. We have all the information about the Afghan Adjustment Act and what you can do to support.
Thank you so much, Mari Carmen. Okay, and so I'll bring it back now to the issue of forced marriage, but now talking a bit more about child marriage and additional vulnerabilities here. And although it may seem that these are all, again, separate issues, I hope for folks it's easy to recognize how all of it can be interwoven together, how someone could be a new, young person in the country and facing harm at home and potentially a future fear of abuse, right? And needing these wraparound services, and for folks to understand the full dynamics of what they are facing. And so let's talk a little bit about child marriage in the US. At the Tahrir Justice Center, we do not equate every case of child marriage with forced marriage. But what we do know is that the statistics in the United States are very concerning. And they have several factors that are incredibly, I would say, scary for us to when we are discovering them. One being that the vast majority of the child marriages involve girls who are marrying adult men. Often these men are decades and decades older. Another concerning factor, especially for those of us who are advocates for survivors of sexual assault, is that often we're seeing that the minimum age of marriage laws are in contradiction with the age of consent laws. And so in some places where we should see, arrest or criminal charges, what we're seeing is, marriages used as a way to, kind of put a bow on a situation versus, someone getting the support that they need. And again, the criminal charges, criminal process continue. Often we're also seeing that in these with these marriage laws, that parental consent is, the exception, right? So someone can be married under a certain age if they have parental consent. But unfortunately, that does not, help someone whose parents are the main perpetrators. And in issues of forced marriage, we are seeing parents and family members, important members of the community be those individuals who are pushing and have control over the household. But we are excited to know about our work in this movement is that 33 states have passed reforms, and 9 states only 9 as of last month, and the 10 is right on the horizon, have completely, ended marriage under the age of 18. And so we know that, minors are, a unique vulnerable population. And then you add the complexities of, who they are, where they come from, family status, their status. Again, additional considerations that place young people at greater risk. For the sake of time, we won't dive deep into, the challenges. I think we all know that minors face great challenges. At times, they don't know their rights and options. It's hard for me to know my rights and options as an adult. And even when there's systems in place to help them, often the cases are not understood. And again, this is a unique position when someone is being forced to marry to truly prevent a future harm. But a lot of our systems, especially youth-serving systems, are not prepared for stopping something that hasn't happened yet, right? They're less proactive and more reactive, right? And so We also know from US specific research that regardless of if the marriage was forced or not, women who are married as girls face greater challenges across the lifetime. Whatever a girl's starting point, child marriage does stack the odds against her. It increases her instability and insecurity over time. So, Mari Carmen, I'm going to pass it to you to talk to us a little bit about the unique protections in Texas that we were very excited to see. And as far as we know, still remains to be the only state where with this unique definition.
Yes, this is really exciting, Helitz, and this is where I think I'm proud to be a Texan that we're leading the way in this area. One of the things that I remember so clearly, and I don't know, Helitz, many years ago, it was either you or Casey, they called me, and there was a situation where there was an impending marriage for a child, and there was absolutely nothing that we could do. No abuse had occurred yet. There was just like looking and crafting it to see how we could actually help this individual. We had to like come up with things that were not conventional, and it was really difficult. So when in 2017, we had new legislation, it created another definition for what abuse is for a child, including in that definition, forcing or coercing a child to enter into marriage. So now we have something that could be, in a way, reportable, something that is cataloged as abuse for which something else could happen, and where we could enter and do something and make a change to protect an individual. One of the things that I know you talked about that is really challenging often, but for this situation, the parents are, providing a safe home, education, food, many other things that on the outside could look like tremendously supportive and are, but there is this one area where sometimes the children really need that additional protection and need the intervention from the state in this way. So this is really exciting. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but this is something that we need to start discussing more broadly, in that it's not just something that is like in the middle of a broad definition of what abuse is. If we go into the next slide, this is the other reason why it's so important, and some of the work that we can do is that now we can file for protective order based on this new additional definition. And of course, that means CPS could do that if they're already temporary managing conservators of a child, but also any other adult could file for a family violence protective order on behalf of a minor that is being threatened with forced marriage. And the relief could be tailored to protect from this marriage from happening. So this is really important. You can select the different options. It could just be like remove passports, do things, alert so that there is no marriage license obtained in a situation like this. But mostly because there are restrictions in our own state, it's these travel restrictions from somebody who might be traveling for a marriage to occur. Now, in the past, if somebody was married abroad, even as a child, and then you came into this state, our state was recognizing those marriage that existed as already existing. Because of recent changes in the law, one of them, Texas, no longer permits marriages of unemancipated children, who become adults. So if they're not emancipated, there is no marriage in the state of Texas anymore. There is not a parental consent option. There is nothing like that. The only individuals that can get married in the state of Texas are adults or those minors who are indeed emancipated. There was a case law in 2019 of an individual who left the state of Texas, married in another state in Missouri, and came back and said, well, now I'm emancipated because I am married. I'm married in another state. It is legal in that other state. So as a married individual, I am now no longer a child, right? And this was a big custody dispute, and it was not the main issue that was being discussed. But in that case, the court found that a marriage that was not, obtained with the emancipation required by the state was in fact a void marriage. Now, this is an appellate court out of Houston who made this ruling. And so it's a possibility that those marriages will not be accepted and could be indeed voided. It may need a legal process to get there, but I do want it to share that information right now. So protective orders can prevent interstate travel to force a child to marry outside of Texas, like in this situation where they could go to another state and get married there. They may not have these restrictions, or of course, this overseas travel where we can restrict the passports being issued. We want to advance to the next slide.
Thank you. And just giving our interpreters a little bit of time. I know this is a lot of information at once. We're happy to continue the conversations, but I also know that folks have other, presentations to get to. And so our program does have additional tools regarding, how to ask someone if they're facing a forced marriage. We also have like a framework that goes into, assessment questions and all of those pieces. But most importantly, for all of us is to really to be honest, we are not expecting everyone to know everything about all the rights and options. None of us are experts, even in our own community, our own background, right? Our role here really is about prevention and healing, and how can we start a conversation based on trust and respect, right? How can we root ourselves in a non-judgmental point of view, and do we know, how to, where to refer someone, or what resource could be helpful for them if you are to have someone come into contact with you, or after this presentation, you review your cases and realize that there are some hidden cases of forced marriage, or some cases where you do have to go back and ask a little bit more to try to uncover the full picture. As simple as it may seem, folks may have never heard that they have a right to say no to a marriage that they do not want. They have a right to leave a marriage that they do not want. And we know that there's no religion that sanctions forced marriage, and that intercourse is not an obligation, and rape and sexual assault can occur within a marriage. And that is very powerful for us to share with folks who, again, may have never heard that they should have a choice. Right? When we talk about remembering the one chance rule, it means, not assuming that that person is going to be able to make contact again, and just being ready to support. And if you're not able to, have a lot of time with the person, then again, having some safe touch points and giving resource information when possible. Earlier, someone asked, I think someone asked, about, getting to the questions. And I know that that it can be scary for some to think about, asking about onsets of marriage, but asking about someone's relationship, honestly, is not uncommon for us. If you're at work and, someone is engaged now, you may engage in conversation, right? And ask about, oh, how did your engagement come to be? And, when's the wedding going to be? How long have you been dating your partner? Some of us are talkative in that way. And so it's just thinking about, well, how do we tailor those questions to ask the service seeker, right? Asking about how do they feel they have a choice in deciding who they will marry or who they married, right? How was that partner selected, right? How do they feel about, that process, and how does marriage take place, in their family or their community, right? Are they being pressured? And so these are questions that are truly not so complicated. And so, Mari Carmen, I don't know if you want to take a minute to just, maybe wrap us up in thinking about how immigrant survivors, are connecting to us.
Most importantly, I think all the different vulnerabilities that we have discussed already. It is important that as an agency, as an advocate, we understand how immigrant survivors are welcomed at our organizations. Like, how do we understand the trauma that they may not express, but that we understand may exist? How are they expected to access our services? Like, how trauma informed is that process that they need to go through to access and get the services and the information that they may need? How are we educating about their rights and options, and how important it is to really give them agency and information for them to start having the ability to make these rights and decisions regarding their options on their own. So incredibly important, especially because, as we've talked about, the many different vulnerabilities, many times the decision to make decisions about their options and their rights and how they want to pursue their rights has been totally taken away. And it's really important that as organizations, we start building them up and give them that agency back by fully explaining options and letting them make decisions on their own on how they want to proceed, teaching us and guiding us to what feels safe and right for them. The other thing that's really important is, like, for us to really reflect, not only, as individuals, but as agencies as a whole, how we can improve access to our services and, just reduce that resource gatekeeping where we decide who might be able to get services and who doesn't, who may get information and who doesn't. And what can we be doing to really transform how information is shared so that more individuals are able to make decisions on their own as well? So these are things to think through, whether you are, an advocate, whether you're an administrator within your organization. It's always good, even when you think, oh, I already figured it out, to really revisit what it is, that experience from the survivor's perspective who is seeking to access services, and what tweaks we can do to make it better, to improve. Sometimes to get a focus group from survivors, former clients, or, it would be incredibly helpful, or from other service providers who refer cases to you to learn what that experience is. So this is really, really important. And some of the things that we can take in, I know Khalid spoke about, forced marriage. Are we asking those questions? Are we really going there to ask and be able to get more information? And then also child marriages, immigrant experience, what are we doing and how are we capturing to give that most holistic of services?
Yeah. Thank you, Mari Carmen. Ultimately, it's all about taking that survivor-centered approach, right? And though, I may have focused on forced marriage, I think that, we can think about just utilizing that type of abuse as an example, right? To remind us of being rooted in that non-judgmental point of view. We can have a lot of assumptions as to why folks may not want to make certain reports or include family in their healing process. And so remembering that these cases are quite complex. The process of help seeking is also complex. And again, utilizing us, the Forced Marriage Initiative, as a resource if you ever need, whether that's, again, for someone you're working with, for deeper training with your, team, your organization, or to just, be a thought partner on a case you may be working on. And so we really appreciate the time. We'll hold off a few minutes in case folks want to ask more questions. Otherwise, you do have my direct email. You have my colleague's phone number listed on the screen. And we just thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, everyone. Muchas gracias to the interpreters too.
Definitely.
And I think somebody asked, we are making the materials in the PowerPoint presentation available, and we've already shared it with TASA. So they will be distributing that to those who participated. Hi, Jen.
Hey, thank you both, Mari Carmen and Elise. What a wonderful, wonderful presentation. So much information. I went ahead and posted the links to the survey, the evaluation. If you would all please fill that out for me. Also, if you would join us at noon is our closing session with Rose Luna. She's got a reveal, an announcement of where our next conference is going to be next year. So you want to be sure and attend that. It's going to be exciting. And again, thank both of you. Thank all the attendees. We could not do this without you. So we appreciate you so much. Again, Mari Carmen, good to see you. Halid's wonderful presentation. Thank you again.
Great, thank you. And I just, there is a link that's not working. Maria Walton, is that our link or is it?
Nope. I think it was for the survey, but I actually just re-clicked it back for folks.
Great.
Thank you.
Of course, not a problem at all. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.